Christmas was always my favorite time of year, a season of warmth, laughter, and family. Or at least, that's what I used to believe. This year, though, the holiday lights outside my window only reminded me of how far I'd been cast aside. When my father told me Christmas was cancelled, I accepted it without question. Money was tight, he said. There would be no tree, no gathering, no celebration. I spent the night alone, convincing myself that family struggles sometimes meant making sacrifices. But the next day, a single phone call shattered that illusion. Christmas hadn't been cancelled at all, it had just been celebrated without me. That moment changed everything. It forced me to confront a truth I had long ignored. I was no longer welcome in the family I once called my own. And as I pieced together the real reason for my exclusion, I discovered a betrayal far deeper than I could have ever imagined. I was 14, the last time I truly felt the magic of Christmas in my parents' home. My family, my father, mother, and older sister. June wasn't perfect, but for 1 month each year, we seemed united by the season's joy. We decorate our modest house with tinsel and lights, bake cookies until the kitchen smelled like a sugary wonderland, and gather around the piano to sing carols in off-key harmony. Even my father, stern and silent through most of the year, would crack a rare smile as he hung our stockings by the fireplace. But everything changed the year my mother died. I was 16. Struggling to comprehend a world without her laughter, her cooking, her unconditional love. My father buried himself in work, returning home late each night, and my sister June drifted into her own world of teenage dramas. The once festive house became a silent monument to loss. Even that year, we still had a small tree, a few wrapped gifts from neighbors trying to keep our spirits up. But the glow was gone, replaced by a jagged emptiness that no holiday cheer could mend. Time passed, and new traditions formed a subdued version of Christmas, more about duty than celebration. By the time I turned 20, I had saved enough to move out, renting a cramped apartment a short drive away. I hoped that putting distance between myself and the memories might help me heal. Instead, I found myself alone with a tree so small it fit on my kitchen table. A single string of colored lights glowed weakly in the darkness. Each year I held on to a glimmer of hope that my family might reach out, that we could rebuild what we had lost. But year after year, I was met with lukewarm invitations or half-hearted phone calls. Things deteriorated further when my father remarried. Sharon, my stepmother, made it abundantly clear. She didn't like me. She had 2 children, my new step-siblings, Mason and Abby, and seemed determined to create a new family unit that included everyone except me. Father went along with it, whether out of guilt or a desperate need for companionship, I never knew. June, meanwhile, did her best to keep the peace, but her efforts fell flat. Our family gatherings, once filled with holiday laughter, became stifling affairs I dreaded. So when December rolled around that year, I tried to maintain a shred of optimism. I hung a small wreath on my apartment door and saved enough money to buy modest gifts for everyone, my father, June, even Sharon and her children. I wasn't wealthy by any stretch. I worked in a bookstore, scraping by to pay rent. But I believed in the spirit of giving, holding on to the hope that maybe a thoughtful gift could bridge some gaps. Then came the call that changed everything. My father's voice on the other end, sounding hesitant and subdued, told me Christmas at home was cancelled. He said finances were tight, that maybe we'd gather for a simple dinner in January or February if things improved. I felt a twinge of disappointment, but also empathy. Father's construction business had been struggling. I remembered how Mother used to pinch pennies, especially during tough times. Perhaps it made sense. Yet something was off. A day later, I found out the painful truth. Not only was Christmas very much on, but it was happening without me. And that revelation would set me on a path toward both heartbreak and a long overdue reckoning. I was sitting alone by my tiny tree, the phone clasped in my hand, the dial tone humming in my ear. My father had just told me in no uncertain terms that the holidays were too much trouble that year. No parties, no gifts, nothing. My chest felt hollow, as if the bottom of my heart had dropped out. Still, I tried to be understanding. "It's okay, Dad," I managed, forcing cheer into my tone. "We can do something later, maybe in the new year." He made a non-committal noise in response. "We'll see," he said, "but don't expect much." I hung up and stared at the flickering lights on my minuscule tree. That was when the tears started. My eyes burned as I pictured the ghost of Christmases past, Mother's cheerful voice instructing me to add more sugar to the cookie, dough, Father stringing up lights in the cold, June hooking ornaments onto the tree while humming along to holiday songs. I tried to remind myself that life moves on, that traditions change, that grief can alter families in unpredictable ways. The next day, though, changed everything. Late morning, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from June. I picked up, expecting maybe a check-in or a quick chat about holiday blues. What I heard instead made my blood run cold. "Hey," June said breathlessly. "So, you're not coming? Coming where?" I asked, confused. She hesitated. "To the house, for Christmas. Everyone's here already. Dad was wondering if you got lost." My heart lurched. My father had told me it was cancelled, that there was no celebration. I swallowed against the sudden dryness in my throat. I thought he said there was no Christmas this year. A long pause on June's end. Then, quieter, "Wait, he told you that? That doesn't make sense." Her voice trailed off as though she'd just realized something sinister. "Caitlin, maybe there's some misunderstanding. They're all here. Mason, Abby, Sharon, Dad, a few family friends. The place is decked out like always, my vision blurred with tears. The silent heartbreak gave way to a hot anger that pulsed at my temples. So it's not cancelled, I managed. They just told me that, to keep me away." June mumbled something incoherent. She didn't deny it, and that lack of denial was all I needed to confirm the truth. Somehow, my own family had conspired to exclude me from Christmas. For all the years I'd tried to keep the spirit alive, for all the times I put on a brave face, they chose to actively shut me out of what was once the most treasured gathering of the year. I ended the call, my hand shaking. 1,000 questions swirled in my mind. Why? Was it Sharon's doing, or had my father also wanted this? What had I done that was so unforgivable they'd rather lie about cancelling Christmas than just tell me not to come? Anger flashed like lightning in my chest, overshadowing my hurt. This wasn't just a snub or a slight. It was cruelty, a betrayal of the final thread connecting me to them. For a moment, I considered driving over there, bursting through the front door, demanding explanations. But a deeper part of me, the wounded child who once begged for love, realized that no confrontation would undo their betrayal. So I did the only thing I could. I sat down, cradled my phone, and let the heartbreak wash over me in waves. Then, somewhere amidst the tears, a spark ignited a resolve not to be their victim anymore. In the days that followed, I did a lot of thinking. If I was honest with myself, the lie about Christmas was just another entry in a long list of slights I'd endured. The cracks had been forming for years, I realized, long before my mother passed away. Subtle things, my father's reluctance to praise me for any accomplishment, his tendency to focus on June's achievements instead, Sharon's undisguised preference for her own children. Even small details like how the family photos around the house included everyone but me or how invitations to gatherings often arrived too late for me to attend comfortably. Yet I always wrote these things off as minor oversights or misunderstandings. I was used to being the easygoing one, the peacekeeper. Don't make waves, my mother used to say in times of conflict. You're stronger than you think, Caitlin. Let them do what they want, and you focus on your own path. But she never meant for me to be a doormat. She never anticipated I'd be deliberately excluded from my own family's holiday. As Christmas Day wore on, I refused to contact them. June tried calling back once or twice, probably hoping to smooth things over, but I let the calls go to voicemail. My father's number never appeared. The hollowness in my chest settled into a dull ache of betrayal. Despite the swirling emotion, I felt a glimmer of clarity. This was a turning point. No longer would I cling to illusions that my family might come around. They had made their stance clear. I spent Christmas alone, curled up on my sofa, watching old holiday movies on mute. The irony of the jolly characters dancing across the screen wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed periodically with texts from friends wishing me a Merry Christmas. They had no idea the heartbreak I was enduring. I responded with polite well wishes, determined not to let my personal drama taint their cheer. The next morning, I woke up to find a text from my stepmother, Sharon. Hope you had a nice holiday. We missed you. Maybe next year. The hypocrisy made my skin crawl. I tossed the phone aside without replying. She knew exactly what she'd done, yet I couldn't just bury the hurt. Something in me simmered, refusing to let this pass without consequence. I felt the weight of every old wound pressing in, every time they'd made me feel less than, unwanted, or invisible. And now they'd orchestrated a lie to remove me from Christmas, our once sacred tradition. I decided then and there that I would discover the truth of why they did this. And if retribution was called for, so be it. I was done burying my pain. If my father, Sharon, or anyone else thought they could keep me on the outside forever, they were sorely mistaken. Because for the first time in my life, I felt a fierce need to protect myself and ensure they never had the chance to wound me like this again. As the bitter bite of winter intensified, I found a new occupation for my restless mind, searching for the motive behind their deception. I replayed every conversation from the weeks leading up to Christmas, combing through them for clues. Were there any hints that something bigger was at play? One detail jumped out at me. A few months prior, my father had mentioned that my grandmother's will was being revisited. Grandma Rose, my mother's mother, had passed away the year before, leaving behind a small estate. She and I had been close, especially after Mom died. Grandma had always been my safe haven, and I spent many weekends helping her run errands or simply chatting. If there was anyone who made me feel valued in my family, it was her. So when she passed, I grieved deeply. The day of her funeral, my father and Sharon were preoccupied with their own social circles, paying fleeting respects before turning their attention to small talk about business deals and town gossip. I remember standing at Grandma's graveside, my face stained with tears, feeling alone despite the crowd of black-clad mourners. Not long after that, my father told me the will was straightforward. The house would be sold and the proceeds split among the children, my mother's siblings, while smaller keepsakes were designated to grandchildren. I assumed I'd receive something sentimental, maybe some old books or crocheted blankets. But the conversation never went further. My father didn't bring it up again, and I assumed all was settled. Now, I wondered if something about that inheritance had changed. Had Grandma Rose left me something more substantial, enough that my father and Sharon might resent me for it? My mind raced, piecing together half-remembered remarks from months earlier. June had once let slip that Grandma wanted to do something special for me, given how I cared for her in her final years. Could my family's Christmas deception be tied to money? It was an ugly possibility, but my father had become more money-minded over time, especially after his business struggles. Determined to find out, I decided to contact Grandma's lawyer. I still had his card from the funeral. My hands shook as I dialed the number, uncertain if he'd even speak to me about the estate. But to my surprise, after verifying my identity, he confirmed that the estate had concluded probate, and I was set to receive a portion, something more than the keepsakes originally outlined. He hesitated before giving details. "I should speak with your father as well," he said, "but I can confirm that you're named in a supplementary clause your grandmother added. It's a decent sum, especially in these times." A swirl of emotions brewed inside me. This was likely the missing puzzle piece. My father had hidden the final reading of the will from me, and perhaps orchestrated the Christmas ruse so I wouldn't find out during the family gathering. Perhaps he believed if I were absent, I wouldn't learn the truth from any relatives who might mention it offhand. A cold fury took hold of me. My grandmother, who loved me deeply, had left me something special, and my own family tried to keep me in the dark, possibly to claim it for themselves. Even if it was just a modest inheritance, the principle stung more than the money itself. They lied. They excluded me. They betrayed my grandmother's final wishes, all in the name of greed. My discovery about the inheritance ignited a new sense of purpose. I wasn't just a wronged daughter who'd been left out of Christmas. I was an heir, singled out by my grandmother's love, and my family had tried to trample on that final gift. My anger was a hot coal in my chest, fueling my resolve, but I needed proof. If I confronted my father or Sharon without evidence, they'd likely gaslight me or spin some half-truth to undermine my stance. I decided to reach out to the one person who might help me from within, my sister, June. My relationship with June was complicated. She was older by 3 years, always the golden child, in my father's eyes pretty, poised and obedient. Still, she wasn't malicious. Over the years we drifted apart, mostly because I felt overshadowed. But the phone call on Christmas Day suggested that maybe she didn't realize they had lied to me. She sounded genuinely taken aback, so I texted her, "Need to talk about Grandma's will. Please don't mention to Dad or Sharon. Meet me at Willow Cafe tomorrow at noon." To my relief, she replied with a short but affirmative "okay." "See you then." The next day I arrived early, nerves on edge. I claimed a table near the back, away from prying ears. The air smelled of fresh coffee and pastries, a faint holiday tune playing overhead. Despite the cheerful ambience, my stomach churned with apprehension. What if June had known all along and had gone along with the lie? June walked in, her posture poised, but her eyes darting as though she feared being watched. She spotted me and slid into the seat across, a worried crease in her forehead. "Hey," she said softly, folding her hands on the table. "Thanks for coming," I began, pushing aside any small talk. "I found out about Grandma's estate, the part where she left me something. I think Dad and Sharon tried to hide it. I suspect that's why they lied to me about cancelling Christmas." June's eyes widened. "They told you it was cancelled? That's insane." She exhaled sharply, frustration colouring her features. "I didn't know. I truly didn't. On Christmas Eve, they said you couldn't make it because you had to work." When I asked for details, Sharon changed the topic. My heart clenched. It was one thing for them to exclude me. It was another for them to craft a lie so thorough that even June believed it. "It has to do with the will," I insisted. "Grandma made changes to leave me a sum of money or something else. Father obviously didn't want me to know." June hesitated, glancing around the cafe as if the walls had ears. "I overheard them talking about the estate a couple of weeks ago. Dad sounded stressed, and Sharon mentioned needing the funds for the business. Something about bridging a shortfall. I think they plan to claim everything, including your portion." She swallowed hard. "But if Grandma wrote you specifically into the will, that's theft. I can't believe Dad would do that. Or maybe I can, but it's still shocking." I felt tears threaten at the corner of my eyes. "I need your help, June. I want to talk to the rest of the family, Mom's side, the uncles and aunts." Maybe they can confirm what Grandma intended. But I don't want Dad or Sharon to find out yet. Not until I have all the facts. She nodded, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have called you sooner, asked why you weren't there, but I never guessed they'd do something so cruel. Whatever you need, I'll help." For a moment, the tension in my chest loosened. We might have drifted apart, but June was still my sister, still the girl who used to share secrets with me under our blankets at night. Maybe I wasn't completely alone. Maybe, with her help, I could expose the truth and reclaim the last gift Grandma Rose had left for me. Buoyed by June's willingness to help, I set a plan in motion to gather more information. Over the following week, we discreetly contacted our aunts and uncles on my mother's side people. We rarely saw after Mom's funeral. It felt odd to reconnect under such circumstances, but we needed every scrap of insight they could offer. My Aunt Leah, Mom's younger sister, was the most forthcoming. A friendly woman with salt and pepper hair, she'd always had a soft spot for me. "Your grandmother mentioned leaving you a sum of money," Leah recalled when I called her. "She felt you were the only grandchild who consistently took care of her, running errands, helping around the house." I remember her saying, "I want Caitlin to have a better start in life than I did." She was adamant about it. I thanked Leah profusely, my heart warm with gratitude that at least someone had recognized my bond with Grandma. Leah hesitated before adding, "I found it strange when your father told us not to mention any details of the will at the reading. He said you already knew everything. But I thought it was odd that you didn't show up, especially since your grandmother cherished you so much." That revelation set my blood boiling again. My father had not only lied about Christmas, but apparently orchestrated my absence from the will's reading too. I suppressed the urge to scream and calmly asked Leah if she had a copy of the official documents. She didn't, but she promised to ask around. "We'll find a way to get you a copy," she assured me. Over the next few days, June and I worked together in secret. She would quietly eavesdrop on conversations in the family home whenever she visited. Meanwhile, the first scoured through old letters and paperwork Grandma had given me. Among them, I found a handwritten note dated just a month before Grandma Rose's passing, stating she intended to update her will to ensure I received a portion. It wasn't legally binding by itself, but it was powerful evidence of her intentions. While I wrestled with these discoveries, the holidays pressed on around me. Storefronts flashed after Christmas sales, neighbors took down their decorations, and the city lights seemed to dim. My father still hadn't reached out, and I didn't make an effort to contact him. But part of me longed for him to call, if only to confirm his betrayal with his own words. Finally, Aunt Leah emailed me a scanned copy of an addendum to the will. It specified that upon Grandma Rose's passing, a sum of $30,000 would be set aside for me, earmarked to help me pursue higher education or buy a place of my own. My chest tightened as I realized the significance of that amount. It wasn't millions, but to someone like me, barely making ends meet at the bookstore, it was life-changing. Enough to pay off debts, maybe go back to school part-time, or move to a safer neighborhood. Leah's note read, "This is what was read aloud at the final session. I'm sorry if you weren't informed sooner. There was no mention of my father's or Sharon's involvement, but I had all the proof I needed. Grandma wanted me to have this money, and they had tried to withhold it." Furious disbelief coursed through me. How could my father stoop so low? How could he claim to love me while orchestrating a deception to steal from me? A question tugged at my mind. Did June share any of the blame? She insisted she knew nothing until after Christmas, and part of me believed her, but a seed of doubt remained. Either way, she was helping me now, and that was enough for the moment. My focus was on the truth and reclaiming what was mine. And if it meant unmasking my father's greed in front of everyone, family, friends, And the law, so be it. As I continued unraveling the tangled web, the emotional toll weighed heavily. My sleep was restless, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if Father and Sharon had already spent the money? What if they tried to discredit me by painting me as ungrateful or manipulative? I realized that in a twisted way, I was gearing up for a battle against my own flesh and blood. When I confided these fears to June, she squeezed my hand and said, "We'll figure it out, Caitlin. You're not alone in this." Her reassurance helped, yet I couldn't ignore the bitter reality that our family was splitting at the seams. One evening, I got an unexpected phone call from my father. My heart pounded as I stared at the phone's screen, wrestling with whether to answer. Ultimately, curiosity won out. I picked up, keeping my voice neutral. "Hello?" I said. "Hey, Father," replied gruffly. "Haven't heard from you. Everything okay?" The sheer gall of his question left me momentarily speechless. After everything he'd pulled, he wanted to act as if things were normal. I forced my tone to remain calm. "Why would I be anything but okay, Dad? After all, you cancelled Christmas, right?" A pause. I sensed he was fumbling for words. "Yeah, about that," he began. "There was some confusion. We decided last minute to do something small. Didn't have time to call everyone." "Interesting, because June mentioned you'd known for weeks," I said, letting a hint of anger seep in. "But I suppose if you didn't want me there, all you had to do was say so." He exhaled sharply. "Now that's not fair. You're my daughter. I'm sorry if it seemed like we excluded you. It wasn't deliberate." My grip tightened on the phone. The lies, the spin. I wanted to unleash the fury bottled inside me, but I was mindful not to tip my hand about the will just yet. So I bit my tongue and asked, "So, is that it? You just called to say sorry, maybe next time? Because this isn't an inconvenience, Dad. This is a betrayal." His tone hardened. "Don't be dramatic. We've had a tough year financially. Sharon wanted a small gathering. We didn't think you'd mind." "I minded," I snapped. "And I mind that you're acting like none of this is a big deal." I took a deep breath, deciding to test the waters. "By the way, how's the business? I hear you've been struggling." "Must be tough." He hesitated, wariness creeping into his voice. "It's fine. We're sorting out some loans, bridging finances." "Why?" "No reason," I answered, but I filed away his response. He didn't deny that he needed money, which aligned with my suspicion that he'd tried to siphon off my inheritance to patch up his failing business. He ended the call soon after, leaving me with a swirl of anger and confusion. His apology rang hollow. The conversation felt like a surface-level attempt to gauge how much I knew or how resentful I was. He never once offered an explanation that made sense, nor did he invite me over to make amends. There was no mention of my grandmother's estate, not even a passing comment about her final wishes. Just more avoidance, more gaslighting. In that moment, I realized I was done hoping for a heartfelt apology from him. My father had chosen his path. Now, it was time for me to choose mine, and that meant taking steps to protect my rightful inheritance and exposing the truth, no matter how much it hurt. With the addendum to the will in hand, I contacted the estate lawyer again, explaining the situation in more detail. Though he was initially guarded bound by client confidentiality, he confirmed that my father had indeed collected most of Grandma Rose's liquid assets to distribute as specified. My portion, however, remained untouched in a special account, awaiting my claim. That was a relief. At least, my father hadn't stolen the money outright. Instead, he had tried to keep me in the dark so I wouldn't claim it at all. "Can I come by to sign the paperwork?" I asked the lawyer, determination stealing my voice. He seemed hesitant. "In normal circumstances, we'd do a quick distribution, but your father is listed as the primary executor. He requested that your share be withheld until certain family disputes were resolved." My jaw tightened. He's stalling. There's no dispute my grandmother's will is clear. The lawyer sighed. I can't take sides, but if you want to expedite this, you might need legal representation or a court order that compels the executor to release your share. Hanging up, I felt a cocktail of relief and anger. The money was still there, but father was using his position as executor to block me. It was a cunning tactic. As long as no one pressed him legally, he could delay indefinitely. Maybe he hoped I would give up, lacking resources or knowledge to fight him. But I wasn't that timid teenager anymore. Anger spurred me to act. If a legal showdown was what he wanted, so be it. I spent days researching lawyers who specialized in estate disputes, making phone calls, and setting up consultations. My finances were tight, but I was prepared to do whatever it took to secure what Grandma Rose intended for me. During this process, June stayed supportive, feeding me tidbits of information. Dad keeps mentioning how he needs a large sum to settle some debts, she told me one evening over coffee at my apartment. Sharon is dropping hints about a new renovation project for the house. It's like they're counting on that money to bail them out. A pang of sadness shot through me. I remembered times when father acted as though June and I were his entire world, especially after Mom passed. How far he'd fallen so consumed by greed that he'd sabotage my future for his convenience. But that sadness only strengthened my resolve. No matter how painful it was to stand against him, it was necessary. Grandma believed in me, and her final wish was something I wouldn't let him destroy. I drafted a letter to the estate lawyer, formally requesting the release of my inheritance. I cited the relevant clauses in the will addendum, all while carefully CCing my newly retained attorney. It was a bold step, one that felt both empowering and terrifying. I knew once father received a copy of that letter, any pretense of reconciliation would vanish. We were heading for a standoff, and I refused to blink first. A week later, my phone buzzed with a call from my father. My stomach twisted at the sight of his name on the screen. I wondered if he'd finally discovered my legal maneuver. Answering, I steeled myself for whatever was coming. "Hi, Dad," I said evenly. He didn't waste time. "I got a letter from your lawyer," he snapped, anger simmering beneath his words. "You're challenging me over the estate, over money?" I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my own temper in check. "No, I'm enforcing what Grandma Rose wanted for me. There's no challenge if you just do the right thing." He let out a mirthless laugh. "Caitlin, you don't understand the complexities here. The business is on the brink of bankruptcy. If we can't pull together the funds, I could lose everything. The house, Sharon's security, everything." His words tightened my chest. Part of me still loved him, still wanted to help, but another part recalled all the lies he'd told, the cruelty of excluding me from Christmas, and the audacity to withhold my rightful inheritance. "I'm sorry things are tough," I managed, "but that doesn't justify stealing from me or lying about Christmas." "You're being dramatic," he shot back, his voice rising. "It was a misunderstanding. And this," he paused, presumably to collect his thoughts. "This lawsuit you're threatening? It'll tear the family apart." A burst of bitterness welled up in me. What family? The one that lied to me and excluded me? But I held my tongue. "Dad, we're already torn apart. You did that when you lied about cancelling Christmas and withheld the truth about Grandma's will. This money isn't going to fix your problems. You need to find another way." He sighed heavily. "Sharon's been telling me we should just give you some of the money and see if you'll drop the legal stuff. But you want the whole sum, don't you?" I was stunned by his phrasing. He talked as if they were offering me some grand generosity. "I want what Grandma left me, nothing more. It's not your place to decide otherwise." His silence was deafening. Then he muttered, "Fine, you'll have your money. But I'm warning you, Caitlin, this will come between us. Don't expect any help in the future. Hot tears pricked the backs of my eyes. When have I ever received help from you? All I ever wanted was a family, and you made it clear I'm not part of yours. My voice quivered, betraying my hurt. As for the money, you can't hold it hostage any longer. My lawyer and I will see to that. I ended the call, my hands shaking. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. The confrontation had been both cathartic and excruciating. I never wanted to be at odds with my father, never wanted to see him broken or desperate. But I also couldn't deny the relief coursing through me at having finally stood my ground. For so long, I'd endured their slights in silence. Now, I was fighting back, and I wouldn't stop until justice was served. January arrived, the holiday season behind me, but I felt no closure. My father's parting words during our phone call weighed on me like a dark cloud. Even though I was on the verge of recovering Grandma Rose's inheritance, the cost was losing any semblance of relationship with my father. With the legal gears in motion, it didn't take long for the estate lawyer to expedite my payout, especially once he realized I had enough evidence to force compliance. A month later, I received the official confirmation, a check in my name, the exact amount Grandma set aside for me. I stared at the figure, tears pooling in my eyes. This was both a blessing and a painful reminder that love could turn into greed in the blink of an eye. Word spread quickly through the extended family. Some relatives, especially on my mother's side, rallied around me. My aunts and uncles congratulated me for standing up for myself. Others, mostly those loyal to my father, gossiped that I was profiting off a dead woman's generosity. Those words stung, but I refused to dwell on them. I knew Grandma wanted this for me, and I wouldn't let anyone tarnish her final gift. As for the business, rumors circulated that Sharon's lavish spending was partially to blame for their financial troubles. The renovations she insisted on, the fancy dinners, the constant stream of new clothes for her kids, they all drained my father's resources. I felt a twinge of pity for him, trapped in a life that demanded more than he could provide. But he'd made his choices, just as I'd made mine. I tried reaching out to June, offering her a chance to see my new place now that I had the means to upgrade from my tiny, run-down apartment. She agreed, though warily. When she arrived, she admired the cozy living room, the new bookshelf, and the bright windows that let in warm sunlight. I brewed us tea, and we sat at my kitchen table, trying to ignore the elephant in the room. "How are things at home?" I asked gently. She pursed her lips. "Tense. Dad's furious. Sharon won't stop complaining that you ruined their chance to save the company. They're blaming you for it all." A numbness spread in my chest, mingled with relief that I was away from their toxicity. "And you? Are you upset with me too?" June shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "No, I just wish it hadn't come to this. But I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." She squeezed my hand. "Maybe one day things can heal." I squeezed back, a tear sliding down my own cheek. "I hope so," I whispered. "But I won't sacrifice my well-being for the sake of a facade anymore. I'm done pretending it's okay when it's not." Though it was still winter outside, I felt a small warmth blooming inside me. For the first time in years, I believed I could shape my future without seeking my father's approval. I thought of Grandma Rose, wishing she were here to see it. Perhaps, in a sense, she was her final gift had set me free. Despite having reclaimed my inheritance, a part of me still felt unsatisfied. The betrayal over Christmas weighed heavily, unresolved. Father and Sharon had lied to me, not only to keep me away from the holiday gathering, but also to prevent me from learning about the money. It was a cruel, calculated act, and they had walked away with nothing more than a bruised ego, continuing their lives as though they were the ones wronged. A spark of anger took root. The more I dwelled on it, the more I realized I wanted them to feel repercussions beyond losing access to my funds. Perhaps it was petty, but I couldn't deny the deep-seated desire for a reckoning. Christmas used to mean so much to me, representing love, unity, the best of family tradition. They had taken that from me, turned it into a weapon of exclusion. I mulled over possible ways to expose them. Part of me wanted to publish an open letter or talk to the local paper, revealing their hypocrisy. But that seemed too public, too messy. Another idea was to call a meeting with the extended family, lay out the documents, and let them judge Father and Sharon. Yet, I wasn't sure if fueling more family drama was the answer. The most tempting route was to confront them directly in a setting they valued like a holiday tradition they couldn't ignore. But Christmas was another year away, and my anger burned now. I considered the next big family event, Sharon's lavish birthday party in the spring, which she hosted each year at their home. It was an unspoken show of status, complete with catered meals and a carefully curated guest list. If I could show up and present the truth, there my father's lies, Sharon's greed, it would be the ultimate act of revenge, a moment of justice delivered in front of their high society friends. As I toyed with this idea, guilt battled with rage. Did I really want to sink to their level, humiliating them publicly? But then I thought of that lonely Christmas Eve, me in my empty apartment, tears streaming down my face while they laughed around the tree. My father's voice echoing in my head, telling me it was cancelled. The memory hardened my resolve. I might have the moral high ground, but they needed a lesson that would resonate. A quiet legal settlement had cost them some money, but it hadn't touched the root of their cruelty. I wanted them to see, in front of all the people they tried so hard to impress, that they weren't untouchable. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the shame they inflicted on me. That night, I slept fitfully, half excited and half terrified by my own thoughts. Perhaps revenge wouldn't heal all my wounds, but it could grant me the closure I desperately craved. And with Sharon's birthday just weeks away, the stage was set for a reckoning that might finally lay this betrayal to rest. The day of Sharon's birthday party arrived in early spring. The snow had melted, revealing fresh buds on the trees and the promise of renewal in the air. A wave of nerves rolled through my stomach as I got dressed. I chose a simple yet elegant outfit, a knee-length navy dress, black heels, and a necklace that once belonged to my mother. The subtle statement reminded me of who I was and what I stood for. June had secured me an invite, though I suspected Sharon had no clue I was coming. My father likely assumed I'd decline if I knew how unwelcome I was. Or perhaps he didn't realize. June had put my name on the guest list. Regardless, I planned to arrive with no fanfare, simply walking in as if I belonged, because in fact I did more so than Sharon ever would. When I pulled up to the house, a pang of nostalgia struck me. My childhood home looked the same, the lawn painstakingly manicured, a wreath of spring flowers on the front door. Memories flooded back, Mom in the kitchen baking, me and June racing across the grass. But I shoved them aside, focusing on the mission at hand. Guests mingled inside, dressed in semi-formal attire. Sharon loved to flaunt her taste, which usually meant expensive caterers and a well-stocked bar. The air buzzed with polite laughter and clinking glasses. I spotted my father near the living room, wearing a forced smile as he greeted acquaintances. When his eyes landed on me, they widened in shock, quickly morphing into a scowl. "Caitlin," he said tersely, stepping away from his conversation, "I didn't expect you." His gaze flitted around, clearly worried about who might see us talking. "Hello, Dad," I replied with calculated calm. "I heard there was a party. I thought it might be nice to pay my respects to Sharon on her special day." He frowned. "This isn't the time or place," but before he could finish, Sharon approached, her expression turning cold the moment she recognized me. She wore a form-fitting sequined dress, her hair styled to perfection. "I wasn't aware you were on the guest list," she said, flatly, crossing her arms. "Must have been a mistake." I offered her my sweetest smile. "Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world. Happy birthday." Tension crackled in the air, drawing curious glances from nearby guests. My father glanced around, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't make a scene," he warned. "If you have any respect left for this family, you'll leave quietly." My temper flared, but I reined it in, remembering what I'd come here to do. "I'll leave when I'm ready," I said softly, but not before telling a little story. I stepped back, scanning the crowd for a suitable vantage point. My heart thumped violently in my chest, but adrenaline kept me upright. June appeared at my side, giving me a nervous look. I squeezed her hand quickly, then made my way to the middle of the living room. Clinking a fork against a champagne glass, I called for attention. The chatter died down as heads turned my way, curious. Sharon and father hovered by the edge, dread clear on their faces. My pulse pounded, but I took a steadying breath and spoke, my voice carrying through the hush. "Thank you all for indulging me. I promise I won't keep you long. I just wanted to share something on Sharon's special day. It's about family, and the lengths some will go to hide the truth." Silence enveloped the room, every eye fixed on me. Somewhere in the back, I heard the faint notes of background music continuing, a dissonant counterpoint to the tension swirling around us. My father took a step forward, eyes blazing with warning. Sharon's face was a mix of panic and fury. I felt June's presence at my back, a small measure of support that steadied me. "For those who don't know me," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "I'm Caitlin. This used to be my home. Not too long ago, I was lied to told that Christmas was cancelled here. Meanwhile, everyone gathered to celebrate without me. I found out only after the fact, from my sister. At first, I didn't understand why my own family would exclude me. But then I discovered that there was an inheritance money left to me by my late grandmother, Rose. My father and Sharon didn't want me to find out. They were desperate to keep me away until they could figure out a way to take it for themselves. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few guests shot looks at Sharon, who stood rigid, her complexion pale beneath the meticulously applied makeup. My father growled, "Caitlin, that's enough." But I continued, voice rising above the hush. They tried to hide the will, block me from receiving what Grandma intended for me, money. She set aside because she knew how much I struggled, because she believed in me. That's the truth. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document, the addendum to Grandma's will. This is the legal proof. I had to hire a lawyer and threaten a lawsuit to get my rightful share. So while you all stand here celebrating, I want you to know the price of admission. A father who betrays his daughter. A stepmother who values money and status over decency. And a house built on deception and greed. Tears stung my eyes, but I let them fall. The hush grew denser, broken only by the soft rustle of shifting bodies and the hum of the air conditioning. My father looked like he wanted to disappear, or perhaps throttle me right there. Sharon's lips parted, but no sound came out. The hush lingered a moment longer, then erupted into chaotic murmurs. Some guests looked horrified, others intrigued, still others scandalized. I made no move to stay. My purpose was served. I offered a faint smile, meeting my father's stare one last time. His eyes seethed with rage, betrayal, perhaps even regret, but the time for second chances had passed. I turned, passing by the coffee table, cluttered with half-empty champagne flutes. I heard June call my name, but I kept walking, pushing through the stunned onlookers until I reached the door. The spring air outside was a balm on my flushed cheeks. My heels clicked on the porch steps. As I left behind, the only home I'd ever known, a place that had once symbolized warmth, now tainted by betrayal. Adrenaline thrummed in my veins, but an odd sense of peace settled over me. I'd spoken my truth, forcing them to confront what they'd done. No more secrets, no more quiet heartbreak. Whether or not my father and Sharon changed was out of my hands. I had reclaimed my power. I had taken back the love and devotion they denied me, channeling it into my future. The next day, messages flooded my phone. Some came from relatives, expressing shock or support. A few from father's associates, mildly condemning me for airing dirty laundry. But I felt a calm satisfaction. At last, the weight of their betrayal no longer hung like an albatross around my neck. I was free to walk forward into a life of my own making, a life made possible by Grandma Rose's final gift and my determination to stand up for myself. Looking ahead, I saw a new road open, unencumbered by illusions of acceptance, from a family who'd proven unworthy of the title. Maybe one day I'd forgive my father. But for now, I embraced the clarity of a future where I could heal, build genuine connections, and celebrate Christmas in the spirit it was always meant to hold: love, compassion, and truth. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey, a story of betrayal, resilience, and ultimately self-discovery. While it hurt to uncover my family's hidden agenda, it also gave me the chance to reclaim my voice and break free from the cycle of manipulation. I learned that sometimes the greatest acts of love begin with standing up for yourself, even if it means walking away from those who continually choose deceit over honesty. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. By doing so, you'll help spread the message that personal strength and integrity can triumph over betrayal. Together, let's create a community of courage, one that believes in exposing the truth and celebrating our worth. Thank you for watching. And remember, you have the power to reclaim your narrative, no matter how deeply betrayal cuts. Let's support each other as we move forward, stronger than ever.